I'm standing at the altar, the smell of expensive white lilies thick in the air, looking into the eyes of the woman I've loved for 5 years, and all I can think about is the remote control tucked into the pocket of my tuxedo. It's a small plastic thing, no heavier than a car key, but it holds the power to burn this entire fairy tale to the ground. My heart is thumping a rhythm of pure cold adrenaline against my ribs. To everyone else in this chapel, I'm the lucky guy finally marrying the girl of his dreams. But to me, this isn't a wedding. It's a crime scene investigation and the suspects are all sitting in the front row. Have you ever looked at someone you were prepared to die for and realized you were looking at a complete stranger? Someone who could kiss you goodnight while their heart was already halfway out the door. If you've ever felt that kind of soul-crushing betrayal, please tell me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not the only one who has had to survive a wreck like this. And if you find strength in these stories, maybe hit that subscribe button. It's how we keep each other's heads above water. Ava looks breathtaking. That's the irony of it. Her lace veil catches the light of the stained glass, and her smile is so convincing, it almost makes me doubt my own eyes. Almost. We met 5 years ago at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago on a rainy Tuesday. I remember the way she looked struggling with a broken umbrella and laughing at herself. I fell for that laugh. I fell for the way she seemed so grounded, so real. For half a decade we built a life together. We shared a cramped studio apartment, then a house with a yard. We got a golden retriever named Cooper, who sleeps at the foot of our bed. When my father passed away 2 years ago, Ava was the one who held me while I drifted in the dark. She promised me that no matter what happened, I would always have a home in her. I believed her. I built my entire world on the foundation of those words. I thought I was safe. I thought we were the gold standard of couples that our friends envied. But the thing about glass houses is that you don't notice the cracks until the whole structure is ready to shatter. The first crack appeared about 4 months ago. It was a Tuesday just like the day we met. I was exhausted after a long shift and Ava was already asleep. Her iPad was sitting on the nightstand buzzing incessantly with notifications. Usually I'd ignore it, but the name on the screen caught my eye, Tyler. My cousin. Tyler was the golden boy of our family, successful, charming, the kind of guy who always had a spare key to everyone's house. He and Ava had always been close, which I encouraged. I wanted my future wife to love my family as much as I did. But as I watched the screen, a message flashed that didn't look like family business. It was deleted almost instantly, but not before I caught a glimpse of the words, "I can't stop thinking about your skin." I felt a physical jolt like an electric shock to my stomach. My first instinct was to tell myself I was crazy. It's Tyler, I thought. He's family. He's been my best friend since we were kids. And Ava. She's the woman who cried at every Pixar movie we watched together. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a joke, a weird inside prank, but then I saw another notification, this one from a hidden folder. Next Thursday, same motel. I'm counting the minutes. My hands started to shake so violently the iPad nearly slipped from my grip. I looked over at Ava, sleeping so peacefully beside me, her chest rising and falling in a perfect innocent rhythm. I felt a wave of nausea so intense, I had to run to the bathroom to keep from retching. I didn't wake her up. I didn't scream. Something inside me went completely terrifyingly cold. I knew that if I confronted her, then she would cry, she would gaslight me, and she would find a way to make me feel like the villain for snooping. I needed more than just a glimpse of a text. I needed the truth raw and undeniable. Over the next few weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I learned how to install cloud syncing software on our shared laptop. I learned how to track location history. Every time I kissed her goodbye for work, I felt like I was swallowing glass. Every time she told me she was going out for drinks with the girls, I watched her car icon on my phone move toward a budget motel on the outskirts of the city. The deeper I dug, the more the perfect 5-year history we shared began to rot. I found a secret digital photo album. It wasn't just a recent fling. This had been going on for over a year. While I was planning our engagement party, she was sending him videos from our bathroom. While I was grieving my father's death, she was meeting Tyler at the very motel where we used to stay when we were broke and happy. The ultimate insult came when I checked our joint wedding savings account. I noticed small consistent withdrawals, $200 here, $300 there. I cross-referenced the dates. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was using our wedding fund to pay for their secret getaways. She was literally making me pay for my own betrayal. I sat in my car in the dark for hours after finding that out. I watched the rain hit the windshield, blurring the world outside, and I realized that my entire life was a lie. Every memory of the last year was tainted. The I love yous, the planning for our future children, the choice of the wedding venue, it was all a performance. Tyler was going to be my groomsman. He was supposed to stand beside me at the altar. He had looked me in the eye at Thanksgiving and thanked me for being such a great cousin, all while he was sleeping with my fiancée. The betrayal was so deep, so multi-layered, that I didn't just feel sad. I felt reborn in a furnace of quiet, calculated rage. I looked at the wedding guest list. 200 people. Both of our families. My mother, who loved Ava like a daughter. Her father, who always bragged about how decent of a man I was. If I just canceled the wedding, they would all blame me. Ava is a master of the narrative. She would tell everyone I had commitment issues or that I had changed. She would walk away with her reputation intact, and Tyler would still be the family favorite. I realized then that a private breakup wasn't enough. They had humiliated me in secret for a year. It was only fair that I returned the favor in public. I started going through the motions. I went to the tuxedo fittings with Tyler. I watched him smile and joke about the bachelor party. I sat through the rehearsal dinner listening to her father talk about how marriage is built on trust and the sanctity of the family bond. I looked at Tyler sitting across from me, sipping a beer and nodding along like he was the guardian of morality. I looked at Ava, who was wearing a bride-to-be sash, her eyes sparkling with what everyone thought was joy. I felt a strange detached sensation like I was an actor in a play. I would smile when I needed to smile. I would nod when I needed to nod. But inside I was building a bomb. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat in our living room, Cooper's head resting on my knee, and I looked at the Our Journey slideshow Ava had meticulously put together. It was a 10-minute loop of our happiest moments, us at the beach, us moving into the house, us laughing at a New Year's Eve party. It was meant to play on the big screens during the reception, a tribute to a love that supposedly never wavered. I opened the file on my laptop. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped weeks ago, replaced by a cold surgical precision. I began to edit the file. I kept the first 10 seconds the happy beginning, and then I began to weave in the screenshots. The motel receipts, the GPS logs, the graphic text where they laughed about how oblivious I was, and finally the high-definition footage I'd paid a private investigator a small fortune to capture. I saved the new file under the same name, our_journey_final.mp4. I loaded it onto a thumb drive and tucked it into my vest. Tomorrow, the perfect Ava and the golden boy Tyler would finally get the spotlight they deserved. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and looked at her one last time as she slept. She looked like an angel. She looked like everything I ever wanted. I felt a single sharp pang of grief for the girl I thought she was the one who didn't exist. Then I turned off the light and waited for the sun to rise on the last day of my old life. Morning came with a cruel, bright clarity. The house was a whirlwind of bridesmaids' hairspray and champagne. I slipped out early, claiming I needed some air before getting ready at the hotel near the venue. The drive to the chapel was the longest 30 minutes of my life. I arrived at the venue and found the AV technician. I handed him the thumb drive. Now here I am. The music has started. Ava appears. My fingers brush against the small remote in my pocket as she reaches the altar and places her small warm hand in mine. The warmth of Ava's palm against mine feels like a brand, a searing reminder of every lie she's whispered into my ear over the last 5 years. As the minister begins his opening remarks about the sanctity of this union, the air in the chapel feels thin, as if the oxygen is being sucked out by the sheer weight of the hypocrisy filling the room. I can feel Tyler's presence to my right, a shadow that has haunted my life for a year without me even knowing it. He's standing there in his tailored suit, looking every bit the loyal cousin, while in his pocket he probably has the same phone he used to send those graphic messages to my bride-to-be. The ceremony proceeds like a slow-motion car crash. Every amen from the congregation feels like a punch to the gut. I'm an observer in my own life, watching the version of Ethan who was happy and naive die a slow, agonizing death right here in front of the altar. When the ceremony finally concludes with a kiss that tastes like ash, we walk back down the aisle as husband and wife in the eyes of the law, though in my heart, we are already ghosts. The reception venue is a sprawling ballroom decorated with the very white roses that I now realize were paid for with the money she stole from our future. As we enter to the cheers of 200 guests, the nausea I felt weeks ago returns with a vengeance. I have to maintain the mask. I have to dance the first dance. I have to hold her waist and spin her around while the photographer captures the happiest day of our lives. Every time my hand touches the small of her back, I think of the PI's footage. I think of the way she laughed in that motel room, mocking the way I always made sure she had gas in her car and food in the fridge. The psychological toll of this masquerade is starting to fracture my composure. During the dinner service, I find myself staring at the head table. Tyler is sitting there, leaning over to whisper something in Ava's ear. She giggles that same coffee shop laugh that once made my heart skip a beat, and for a second, a primal urge to leap across the table and demand the truth bubbles up in my throat. But I swallow it. I force down a piece of dry chicken that feels like sawdust. I remember the night I hired the private investigator. I met him in a dimly lit diner, the kind of place where people go when their lives are falling apart. He handed me a manila envelope and told me, "You might not want to see this kid." I opened it anyway. Seeing the photos was one thing, but hearing the audio was the moment my soul turned to stone. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a life together using my resources as a safety net. Ava told Tyler she'd stay with me for a few years until the payout from my father's estate was settled, and then they'd accidentally fall in love and move to the coast. They were treating my life like a business transaction, a hurdle to be cleared. That memory solidifies my resolve as the reception moves into the speeches. Her father stands up, his voice thick with emotion, talking about how proud he is to welcome me into their family. He calls me a man of integrity. I look down at my plate, unable to meet his eyes. He doesn't know that his daughter is a stranger. He doesn't know that his nephew is a snake. I feel a fleeting moment of pity for the parents, both hers and mine. They are about to become collateral damage in a war they didn't start. My mother is beaming at me from the third table, her eyes wet with joy, because she thinks I've found the happiness she always wanted for me. The guilt of what I'm about to do to her peace of mind almost breaks me, but then I remember I didn't create this mess. I'm just the one turning on the lights so everyone can see the roaches. I excuse myself from the table, claiming I need to check on the bar tab, but instead I head toward the back of the ballroom where the AV booth is tucked away. I see Marcus the technician sitting behind a bank of monitors. I tap on the glass and he looks up, giving me a quick thumbs up. The thumb drive is plugged in. The Our Journey file is queued. Everything is ready. My heart is no longer thumping. It's vibrating a low-frequency hum that makes my teeth ache. I walk back into the ballroom just as the DJ announces that it's time for the special tribute video. The lights begin to dim. A hush falls over the room. I see Ava move toward the center of the floor, pulling Tyler along with her so they can watch the screen together. She reaches out and grabs my hand, pulling me into the huddle. On the giant projector screens, the first few images appear. It's us 3 years ago at a music festival covered in mud and grinning like idiots. The crowd lets out a collective, "Oh!" Ava squeezes my hand, her thumb tracing circles on the back of my palm. I don't look at the screen. I look at the exit sign glowing red in the darkness. My thumb finds the edge of the remote in my pocket, pressing down on the plastic button until it clicks, signaling the shift in the digital sequence that Marcus is about to trigger. The projector hums a low mechanical growl that sounds like a predator lurking in the shadows of this expensive ballroom. As the light flickers against the massive white screen, I feel Ava's fingers lace through mine, her skin warm and deceptively soft. She leans her head onto my shoulder, watching the first few frames of our history, a montage of sunsets, dog park trips, and shared smiles that I now realize were nothing more than a well-rehearsed mask. To my other side, Tyler stands tall, his chest puffed out with the unearned pride of a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else in the room. The air smells of overpriced champagne and the floral arrangements that I paid for with the sweat of my brow, but all I can taste is the metallic tang of betrayal. I glance at the guests. 200 people are smiling, their eyes glued to the screen, waiting for a love story to unfold. They have no idea they're about to witness an execution. The transition happens with a jarring digital glitch that makes the room gasp. The upbeat acoustic guitar track cuts out, replaced by a sudden hollow silence that rings louder than any music. The screen doesn't show our engagement party. It doesn't show the housewarming. Instead, a grainy, high-definition image of a Motel 6 hallway fills the ballroom. The timestamp in the corner is from 3 weeks ago, a night Ava told me she was staying late at the office to finish the quarterly reports. The room goes from a soft murmur to a deafening, suffocating stillness. I feel Ava's hand go limp in mine. I don't let go. I grip her fingers tighter, pinning her to the spot as the video begins to play with crystal-clear audio that echoes off the high ceilings. On the screen, Ava and Tyler appear walking toward a room door. They aren't just talking. They are draped over each other with a familiarity that makes my stomach turn into a knot of cold iron. Tyler's arm is hooked around her waist and he's whispering something into her ear that makes her throw her head back and laugh the same laugh I thought was reserved for our private jokes. The camera follows them as they enter the room and the audio catches the heavy click of the deadbolt. Then the dialogue starts. It's not just the physical act that burns, it's the words. Tyler's voice, amplified by the ballroom's professional sound system, booms through the hall. "How much longer do we have to play this game? I'm sick of pretending to like him." And then Ava's response. It's a voice I don't recognize, sharp, calculated, and devoid of the sweetness she's been feeding me for 5 years. "Just until the wedding, Tyler. The estate payout from his dad is coming through next month. If I leave now, I get nothing. If I wait, we get everything. He's so oblivious it's almost pathetic. He thinks he's protecting me, but he's just funding our retirement." The sound of a chair scraping against the floor erupts from the front row. It's Ava's father. His face is a shade of purple I've never seen on a human being. Beside him, my mother has her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that shatters my heart. But I don't stop the video. I want them to see it all. I want them to see the screenshots of the bank transfers, the wedding dress deposit that actually went toward Tyler's new truck. I want them to see the text messages where they joked about my father's funeral, calling it a payday rather than a tragedy. Ava finally finds her voice. It's a choked, guttural sound. "Ethan, turn it off. Please turn it off." She tries to pull away, her eyes darting around the room at the 200 people who are now looking at her like she's a monster. She looks at her mother, who is weeping into a napkin, and then at her father, who looks like he's having a stroke. Tyler, the golden boy, is frozen. His arrogance has evaporated, replaced by a pale, trembling cowardice. He looks at the exit, then at the angry murmurs starting to rise from my side of the family. My brothers are already standing up, their faces dark with a protective rage that I spent weeks trying to keep under control. The video reaches its climax, a montage of the most graphic messages displayed in giant black text over a white background. "I love you more than he ever could," Tyler had written. "He's just a paycheck," she had replied. The screen goes black and the lights in the ballroom snap on with a blinding clinical brightness. The silence that follows is heavy, vibrating with the shock of two families being torn apart in real time. I finally let go of Ava's hand. I step back, creating a gap between us that feels like a canyon. I feel the remote in my pocket, the plastic warm from my grip, and I realize the weight I've been carrying is finally starting to shift onto their shoulders. I walk toward the microphone at the head table. My footsteps are the only sound in the room. I don't feel the happily ever after I once dreamed of, but I feel a strange, hollow sense of justice. Every person in this room is a witness. There is no gaslighting her way out of this. There is no misunderstanding. The evidence is etched into their retinas. I look at Tyler, who is trying to hide behind a decorative pillar, and then I look at Ava, whose expensive white silk dress now looks like a shroud for the person she pretended to be. I reach for the mic, the feedback whining for a split second before I find my breath to address the wreckage of my life. I look directly at my father-in-law, a man I genuinely respected, and I see the shame in his eyes, shame for a daughter he no longer recognizes. I look at my own mother, and the guilt of hurting her nearly chokes me, but I know that a life built on a lie is no life at all. I stand there, the center of a storm I spent months meticulously brewing, and I realize that while I have lost my partner, I have finally found my voice. The special presentation is over, but the fallout is only just beginning. I can see the security guards moving toward the front, sensing the rising tension as my relatives start to cross the floor toward Tyler, and I know that the next few minutes will define the rest of our lives. I take a deep breath, the smell of the lilies now replaced by the sharp scent of ozone and sweat, and I prepare to speak the final words of the man I used to be before I walk out of these doors and into a world where I am no longer a victim. I tap the microphone, the sound thudding through the speakers like a heartbeat, and I wait for the chaos to settle, just enough for my voice to carry over the ruins of the altar. The feedback from the microphone slices through the suffocating tension like a razor, a sharp electronic whine that forces every gasping guest to lock their eyes on me. I look out at the sea of faces, people who watched me grow up, people who toasted to my future just 20 minutes ago, and I see the wreckage of two families in their expressions. Ava is trembling so violently that the delicate lace of her sleeves rustles like dry leaves. She looks small-cornered and entirely stripped of the poise she spent years perfecting. Tyler is already backing away, his eyes darting toward the side exit, but my brothers have already stepped into his path, their shadows long and imposing against the ballroom floor. I clear my throat, and for the first time in months, the air I breathe doesn't feel like it's poisoned. "I'm sure you all expected a different kind of speech today." I begin, my voice steady, carrying a weight I didn't know I possessed. "I'm sure you expected me to talk about forever and the blessing of finding a partner who shares your values." I pause, letting the irony sink into the silent room. But as you just saw, values is a flexible word for some people in this room. 5 years. That's 1,825 days I spent building a life with a woman I thought was my anchor. I worked double shifts, I skipped vacations, and I poured every cent of my father's inheritance into a future that was being sold behind my back to my own blood. I turn my gaze directly to Ava's parents. Her mother is slumped in her chair, her face buried in her hands, while her father looks like he wants the floor to swallow him whole. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I am truly sorry you had to find out this way. You've been like second parents to me, but I couldn't let you keep believing the lie any more than I could. Your daughter didn't just break my heart, she tried to liquidate it." Then I look at Tyler. The cowardice in his eyes is the most satisfying thing I've seen in years. "And Tyler, you were the brother I never had. You sat at my table, drank my beer, and listened to me talk about my fears while you were laughing at how pathetic I was in a motel room I paid for." I lean into the mic, my whisper amplified to a roar. "The bar is still open, everyone. Please drink up. It's all paid for with the money Ava didn't manage to siphon off yet. But as for this wedding, it's not a celebration, it's a funeral. And I'm the only one here walking away alive. I drop the microphone onto the table with a dull thud that echoes like a gavel. I don't wait for a response. I don't wait for Ava to plead or for Tyler to lie. I turn my back on the altar, on the white roses, and on the two people who tried to hollow out my soul. As I walk toward the main entrance, the crowd parts like the Red Sea. I see my mother standing near the door, her face a mask of grief, but as I pass, she reaches out and squeezes my forearm. There are no words needed. She knows. She saw the truth, and she's already mourning the woman she thought she loved. The cool night air hits my face as I step out of the venue, and for the first time the smell of the lilies is gone. It's replaced by the scent of damp pavement and the approaching Chicago wind. I walk to my car, pull off the tuxedo jacket that feels like a lead weight, and toss it into a nearby trash bin. I don't feel happy yet. Betrayal of this magnitude doesn't just vanish, but I feel light. I feel like a man who just survived a plane crash and realized he can still walk. As I drive away from the lights of the reception hall, I see the blue and red flashes of a police cruiser pulling into the parking lot. Someone must have called them when the shouting started. It doesn't matter. That's a different world now. I reach into my center console and find my phone. I block Ava's number. I block Tyler's number. I delete the shared cloud folders. With every click, a piece of the cage falls away. The next few months are a blur of legal battles and logistical nightmares. Breaking a 5-year life isn't as simple as walking out a door. There were leases to break, a house to sell, and the heartbreaking task of deciding who kept Cooper. In the end, Ava didn't even fight for the dog. She was too busy dealing with the fallout from her own family. Tyler was disowned by our grandfather, the patriarch who built the very estate they were trying to steal. The payday they were counting on vanished into thin air. They didn't get the coast, they got the gutter. I spent a lot of nights sitting on the floor of a small one-bedroom apartment, just me and Cooper, wondering if I would ever trust my own judgment again. If your gut tells you the house is on fire, don't wait to see the flames, I told myself every morning. I had to learn that losing a liar isn't a loss. It's a massive life-saving gain. I wasn't broken. I was being refined. The fire of their betrayal had burned away everything that wasn't real, leaving only the parts of me that were strong enough to survive. 6 months later, I'm standing on a hiking trail in the Pacific Northwest, thousands of miles away from that ballroom. I'm using the money I saved from the honeymoon to see the parts of the world I put on hold for someone who didn't deserve my time. I look at my hand, the tan line where the ring used to be is finally fading. It's a physical reminder that time heals, but only if you stop picking at the wound. I realized that I didn't lose 5 years. I bought back the next 50. I learned that my worth isn't defined by someone else's inability to be honest. I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out at a horizon that finally feels wide open, and I realize that the Our Journey video didn't end at the wedding. It started the moment I walked out. If you've ever sat in the dark wondering how the person you loved could do something so monstrous, I want you to know something. You are not the pathetic one. The person who lies to gain an advantage is the one who's truly empty. Drop a Q in the comments if you've ever had to burn your old life down to find the person you were meant to be. Let's show each other that there is a beautiful, bright life waiting on the other side of the smoke. Don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting started on this new chapter together. I'm finally home.